The new season of Living Alone in the Wild begins. To the season, Big Boss returned to challenge. It takes 3 days to build a shelter. Some big guy made his own mud bricks to build a wilderness house. This is really strong. Anyone who's ever seen the wilderness and lived alone knows that. In addition to the hunting ability of the players, their ability to build is also very important. A new season of Living Alone on the Wild. This time it will take them 3 days to build a permanent shelter. Season 3 returning contestant Kelly. She survived 72 days in the wild. Not only does it demonstrate excellent construction skills and got a lot of food, is a strong returning player from the past season. This time, she will be the judge. Give the contestants some basic survival tools. Let them out in the wild to build a permanent shelter, required to be suitable for one person to live in. And it has a fireplace. Once everyone understands the rules, get the tools and start building. They only have 3 days. This time is very tight. In the game, it takes the average player 5 to 10 days to build. All 3 had different circumstances. Lucas is in the middle of the desert. There aren't many trees here, but a lot of dirt. He decided to build an adobe house. This is relatively difficult. First, he had to make a brick mold. It turns the dirt into bricks. He fashioned a rectangle out of wood. Make cuts in the board by the method of clasp into a solid mold. The next step is to make the mud brick material. Lucas uses some sand, then put some dirt and a handful of grass. Then mix well with water. Kneading makes the resulting clay more resilient. Put the mixed clay into the mold. Keep putting pressure on it with your hands. Remove the mold and you get a brick. Of course, the hardness of these adobe bricks is certainly not enough. When it's set up in time, a few rains may gradually damage it, but a few months alone in the wilderness is enough. It takes a lot of adobe to make an adobe house. That's how Lucas built one after another. But others are starting too. Jordan is exploring. Find a suitable location for shelter. His position is neutral between wet and dry. It is very comfortable to live in this environment. Here he found a ravine. The width of the valley is very large. It saved him time digging the ground. Jordan was collecting some wood nearby. Lay the wood across the slope of the ravine. A roof structure is done. Then put a tarp on it. I didn't think he could do it so easily. Doesn't a shelter like this need hands? He put a lot of stones in the shelter. Prepare to set up a fire pit inside. He made a gap above the tarp. At the same time, a tarp was used to make a window. This chimney position can be closed at any time when it rains. Start a fire in the shelter. It can be seen that the smoke exhaust function is quite smooth. Jordan also made a bed out of sticks. The shelter is very rudimentary, but it satisfies the show crew. It's enough for one person. Requirements for building shelters and shelters for heating. The environment here in Amos is very good, but he's digging. He's going to build a Hogan shelter. This kind of shelter is semi-basement type. A roof was leaking through the earth. They mostly live underground, about a meter down. While digging the ground, dig up a big earthworm. This is a very good protein in the wild. Amos certainly couldn't let it go. He went on working after eating. It's definitely a physical job. Time to the next day. The shelter on Jordan's side is almost complete. And put a lot of pine needles on it to keep you warm if there are sparks on the chimney. So this shelter could be a crematorium. He also found a branch of a wild rose. It has a lot of spikes on it. Jordan left it in front of the shelter. This will effectively secure the tarp. And put a windbreaker over the shelter. He thought it would keep the wind in the shelter. The smoke needs to be vented, and he wants to blow the wind into the shelter. This brain circuit is really weird. That's the whole effect of the Jordan shelter. This is done. The shelter is surrounded by pine needles. When I was sleeping in the middle of the night, once the fire starts, probably in a dream sauna. He seemed very satisfied with the shelter, and the other runners aren't even halfway there. Lucas spends a little time making adobe. Today we spent another day digging, because they're going to build a basement shelter. Just keep throwing rocks at me. The efficiency is too slow. These adobe bricks have been formed and hardened, but we need to dry it a little bit more. This is all the adobe. Can we build a shelter? So far, Lucas is probably the slowest, and Amos has already dug the underground structure. Now he wants to think about making pinned fireplaces. Choose some large rocks nearby. Move them back to the shelter. Again, it's a physical job. Amos cut the stone into the shelter. Build a fireplace out of clay and stone. It looks very hard. It's not easy at all. The fireplace faces the bed directly. There's a gap in the mantelpiece to vent the smoke. The underlying structure is basically complete. Time came to the 3rd day. Today, everyone begins their final work. Amos is collecting wood for Hogan's structure today. There's a lot of wood around here. You can always find something that fits. But because it's a short game, he chose some dead wood to make it. This branch is very good. Work it out. Stick it in the ground. The structure between the wood is then used to hold it in place. Once the tripod is secured, lay some wood on the bottom, mainly for the tripod tripod to play a fixed role. The roof can directly support the weight of a person. Basically, there's no problem anymore, okay? Amos made a doorway for the shelter. Then he continued to lay wood on the roof, cover with bark and soil. This looks very much like a grave, but this sanctuary is fully integrated with nature. Sometimes it's nice to live in a tomb, and Lucas is starting to build the superstructure. These bricks are not yet dry, but it doesn't matter that much anymore. Lucas moved the bricks to the shelter, but I'm looking at a very small amount of adobe. I'm really looking forward to his effect. Then Lucas laid the bricks on the floor one by one. Glue the adobe bricks together with clay, and to make a fireplace out of adobe. What's the matter with his bricks? Soon a fireplace was finished. It looks really big. Amos and Lucas are busy, and Jordan was practicing hunting. The shelter looks big, but it's hard to even do inside. Lucas is going to build a doorway. A large piece of wood was cut down. Just lay it straight across the top. Amos has been putting dirt on the roof of the shelter and put a lot of grass. This will keep out the rain, and the roof has already been put up at Lucas. He covered it with sticks, then put a tarp over it. This shelter is complete. It's kind of rush all day. It's Callie's checkup day. They use only a few simple tools. Can we build a proper shelter? The winner will get 50,000. The first is Amos's sanctuary. His sanctuary is very natural. It's more than 10 degrees warmer inside than outside. You can still stand up. It's pretty empty, so to speak, although the smoke can't escape from the shelter. But overall, it was very good. Number 2 is Jordan's shelter. His shelter looks like a bird's nest. There's also what looks like a fireplace in the shelter. He made a very big fire in there. The difference between the temperature inside and the temperature outside is more than 15 degrees. The temperature part is also qualified. It's hard not to get hot with so much wood burning. Next up is Lucas' sanctuary. I don't know where he makes so many bricks. What he built was a mud brick gun shelter. In fact, the shelter is very short. That's why he was lying down. Otherwise, it's going to blow up. It looks really big from a distance. Half a meter high. Actually, the roof of the shelter was covered with bark. You can keep out the rain and heat. It's 36 degrees outside. It's over 40 degrees inside. The shelter has a fireplace, but there was no smoke. It can be seen that the exhaust effect is very good. Enough to keep out the rain, enough to hold a man. Overall, it was very good. Kelly's final verdict is, Jordan's shelter is the easiest and most convenient. There's a stove in there for cooking. Smoke exhaust also works very well. Qualified but not perfect. Amos' shelter can't be built without some technology. His sanctuary would be indistinguishable even to a small animal. The construction of the shelter is very good. Building such shelters requires a much wider range of knowledge. Kelly likes his roof very much. It's nice to merge with nature. The only drawback is that the fireplace does not exhaust smoke well. Living in it will be plagued by smoke. And Lucas has the most beautiful shelter. Adobe was used to build luxury villas. Make full use of the resources of the current environment. This shelter is habitable, and the fireplace is good for heating. The smoke exhaust effect is also very good. So in the end, Lucas' sanctuary wins. So who do you think has the best shelter? Welcome to leave a comment.